In this limud, we will, Be'ez Hashem, be Isaac in the basic gedorim of two isurim that are noeg bizman avelus shiva, and as we'll see in Machlokes HaRishonim, if they're noeg ba'avelus shloshim, and those two isurim are the iser of kibus, of washing begodim, and the iser of wearing begodim mechubasim, wearing begodim that have been laundered previously. We'll see how this basic sugya in Hilchos Avelos impacts the gedorim of the iser of kibus and levishas begodim mechubasim b'shvuah shechol by Tisha B'Av, and then Be'ezer Hashem see a number of nafkeminas ladina al pi the gedorim in the iser of kibus and the iser levishas begodim mechubasim that are relevant both in Hilchos Avelos and in the halachas of shvuah shechol by. So we'll begin with Tesis in Moed Katan on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, where the Gemara is discussing the din of the iser of being mechabes begodim on Chol Hamoed. That gezerah, as we're familiar with, the iser of kibus begodim on Chol Hamoed, is based on the fact that we want to ensure that the begodim are not left to be washed on Chol Hamoed.
Put up
and
the
a
first
person
page.
enters the moed with begodim already laundered. Therefore, Chachamim made a gezerah to aser kibus on Chol Hamoed. There are instances that the Mishnah lists in the beginning of the third parak of Moed Katan, if someone was an onus, and if someone was precluded from washing begodim, what's called in the Lashon Mishnah erev HaRav. In that case, since it wasn't possible for him to prepare laundered begodim before Yontif, there's an exception that he can wash begodim on Chol Hamoed. One of the exceptions is someone who is an ovel erev Yontif. So the Brisa then says on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis that an ovel who had an avelus erev haregel can wash begodim on Chol Hamoed. From which the Gemara brings a memory of Chisda, Zoisei Meres, the fact that we see that someone who was an ovel erev haregel is allowed to be mechabes begodim on Chol Hamoed. We see Zoisei Meres ovel oser b'tachboises. And we see that an ovel must have been precluded from being mechabes previously, in which case we infer from that, says Rav Chisda, that an ovel is oser in kibus. Tesis asks a kasha v'im toimer. Pshita. Obviously an ovel is oser in kibus. Why? Deho afilu shar meloches oser. Kibus shouldn't be different than any other malacha that an ovel is oser. That's a brisa later on Daf Chaf Aleph, that an ovel is oser. So kibus is also a malacha. So ma'ishna that Chisda is medayik from a brisa, a chidush, that ovel is oser b'tachboises. Ma'ishna kibus than any other is a malacha. Now there's an important diuk to make in Tesis. Tesis lashon is pshita deho afilu shar malachas oser, which is mashma that kibus should be actually more chomur than shar malachas. Tesis doesn't merely ask, V'im toimar pshita deho kibus bichlal shar malachas. Tesis lashon is, V'im toimar pshita deho afilu shar malachas oser. So the beer in that lashon of Tesis is in the Sefer Matzeves Moshe, that's from Moshe Betzal, Mechaber of the Nahor Shragam, Masechta Yevamis, and other svarim. So Moshe Betzalel says that the reason why Tesis writes the lashon afilu is from Inyana de Yoima. Why? Because we see from the halachas of shvuah shechol by that kibus begodim is more chomor than shar malacha. What's the raya? Hare in shvuah shechol by malacha is mutter. The only malachas that we're not allowed to do are malachas that are a ribuy of simcha or extra masa umatam. But otherwise, malacha is mutter. Even though shvuah shechol by has certain dinei evel, but it's mutter basiyas malacha. But yet, midina de Gemara, shvuah shechol by has an iser of kibus. Vaistach ois kibus is more chomur than shar malachas. If you look in the Matzeves Moshe immediately below the second piece of Tesis, in the first of the square brackets, he says v'har nearly kavana ba'afilu. What Tesis means with the words ba'afilu is denoktu mishum de kibus begodim hi kimelocha de simcha. Zog dem Matzebes Moshe, and I'll show this from a Rashi and Tainis Mefurish. The choimer of the Isser of Kibbutz isn't just because it's a malacha. Its choimer is compounded by the fact that it's a malacha shal simcha. Now, something that is just an inyan of simcha without the component of malacha is not necessarily osir. Only certain things chachamim asad that are mar b'simcha. But malacha shel simcha zok the Matzebes Moshe adds a choimer to the issa malacha above shar malachas. So therefore, in Shvuah Shecholboi, which Lefi our minig begins already from Rosh Chodesh, even though we did in the Gemara, it only begins from Shvuah Shecholboi, but we're knowing already from Rosh Chodesh. The reason why kibbutz is osir and shar malachas are mutter is because kibbutz is a malacha shel simcha. That's why Tosfos says pshita doha afilu shar malachas osir. Meaning, from Shvuah Shecholboi we see that malacha is mutter in this state of avelus, but kibbutz is osir. Kol shekain and over when malacha is osir, certainly kibbutz would be osir at malacha shel simcha. Where's the makar for that? Zod the Matzebes Moshe, it comes from Rashi. Ein tainis daf chavtesam lebeis da filu lechabes ulahoniach osir b'shvuah shechal Tisha B'av. It's not just an issa to be mechabes to wear immediately, but it's even just to be oisik in kibbutz. Lahoniach means and to wear after Tisha B'av. Zot Rashi why? Denir kimesiach daitoi sheoisek bekibbutz begodim. Dahainu, the melacha of kibbutz doesn't just fall under the category of ordinary melacha, but it's a melacha which generates hesach hadas from avelus. Why? Because being oisik in meleches kibbutz is a melacha shel simcha. Mimele zok the Matzebes Moshe, that's Tosfos' kasha. From Shavuot Shecholboi we see that there are times when melacha is osir, but melacha is mutter, but kibbutz is osir. Kol shekain b'mei eva, where all malach is also kol shekain kibbutz should be also. That's hence the lashon HaTosfos the ha'afilu shar malach is also. Zok Tosfos v'yesh loymar mishum diktoni lekamon elu dvarim she'ovel osir bohem. There's a brayso later on Daf Chaf Aleph that lists various things that are osir for an ovel to do, and the brayso doesn't list kibbutz. So therefore, Reb Chizda came to emphasize that kibbutz is also osir. Frek the Marashah, Tosfos' answer is a pella. Tosfos' question was, to go back to the kasha, if melacha is osir, kol shekain kibbutz is osir. Where does it say that melacha is osir for an ovel? We said it says it in that brayso on Daf Chaf Aleph. So what was Tosfos' kasha? Tosfos' kasha was, if the brayso clearly says that malacha is osir, kibbutz is osir. So Zok Tosfos, you know why the Gemara has to spell out that kibbutz is osir? Because it doesn't say it in the brayso. Of course it says it in the brayso. It says it in the brayso because the brayso says malacha is osir. Wasn't that the whole question of Tosfos? The kasha of Tosfos was, why does Reb Chizda have to be medayik from a brayso that we see that an ovel Erev Yontav can wash begodim and cholam moed? So vice the reason ovel is osir bekibbutz. Tosfos, why does Reb Chizda have to spell it out? Kibbutz is included in the Isser of Malacha. So Tosfos, because we would have made a mistake to say that since the Brayso doesn't include it later, so Memela we wouldn't know Kibbutz is Osir. The Brayso does say it. The Brayso says Malacha is Osir. As a fact the Marashah. To answer this shaila, the Matzebes Moshe brings from the Yad David, that's David Zintzheim, Friedrich Aachen, who says that there's a very pashta teretz to this kasha. He says, we find a klal in Avelus that even malachas, which ordinarily we would assume would be included in the Isser of Ovel Basias Malacha, but for Tzorchei Haguf, those malachas are mutter. For example, Bishul is a malacha, but an Ovel can cook for himself if he needs. An Ovel can also do all malachas me'ikar adin at Tzorchei Habayis. So we see zot the Yad David that melachas that are tzorchei haguf are mutter for an ovel to do. So memele zot the Yad David, the answer to the Marashah's kasha. If we would only have the brayso on the Chaf Aleph that says melacha is osir, I could have said the following: Einu chanami melacha is osir, and not just is melacha osir, but kibbutz should be more chomer than shar melachas. Because, like Rashi says, it's a melacha which generates simcha, which creates mesiach daitim in avelus. But on the other hand, I have a svara, just the opposite. I can say as much as kibbutz is chomur, It has a kula over shar malachas because it's tzarchei haguf. Memele zok the Yad David. This is what Tosfos is saying is the chiddush of Reb Chizda. Einoch Hanami, Tosfos began by asking that madoch meloch is aser. From Shvur Shechol by I see that kibbutz is more chamur, and memele kibbutz should be aser because it's mutar l'tzarchei haguf. Zok says no. Maybe that's a unique halacha in Shvur Shechol by where we aren't necessarily makel l'tzarchei haguf. But for Evel, where we see we are makel l'tzarchei haguf, we can't necessarily say that kibbutz should be aser as part of malacha. Memele, when Tosfos says that the Gemara in Reb Chizda has to explicitly establish the isser of malacha, that doesn't mean because it's not mentioned in the Braisa, because it would be included in malacha. The reason why is because we gufa have a sofik, is it included in malacha? Because there's always a possibility of saying that tzarchei haguf is a sibut to be matir. That's why we need the memory of Chizdas to say specifically that kibbutz is us. This is the tochen of how the Yad David is mefarish what Tosfos is saying. Now, if we go further, Tosfos on Daf Chof Aleph, on that Braisa, where Tosfos says that the Braisa doesn't explicitly mention kibbutz, Tosfos on Daf Chof Aleph asks the kasha, mafurish. Tosfos has a list of things that the Braisa doesn't include. Tosfos says the Braisa doesn't include kfiyas hamita natifas harosh. So Tosfos has an answer for that. Then Tosfos says, why didn't the Braisa include tefillin and shila shalom? And Tosfos has an answer to that also. And then Tosfos says, tachboises loy choshev. The Braisa doesn't include kibbutz. Why? Dahavyo bichlal rechitza. Because kibbutz is included in the Isser Rechitza. Tosfos afa gav de le'el maisi trei kroi l'rechitza v'tachboises. The Gemara brings two psukim in Novi from Iyov, how we know that an ovel is also b'rechitza and how we know that an ovel is also b'kibbutz. Tosfos says that doesn't matter. The Braisa means to include kibbutz in rechitza. Now, when we see this Tosfos, it seems to be meraps and igri. It doesn't seem to fit with what we just said. Tosfos first of all said that kibbutz is osir because of melacha. And as the Yad David explained, Tosfos says we have a shakal v'taria if kibbutz should be osir out to melacha or could be mutar out to tzarchei haguf. That's the chiddush of Reb Chizda, that kibbutz is osir despite the fact that it's tzarchei haguf. Now Tosfos says there's a whole different reason to ask kibbutz. Kibbutz is osir because of rechitza. And rechitza is tzarchei haguf, and we're still not matter it. So now Tosfos is saying that kibbutz is included in rechitza, so there should be no shakal v'taria. So first of all, we seem to have a stira. Is kibbutz part of malacha, or is kibbutz part of rechitza? That's the first question. Secondly, if kibbutz is part of rechitza, then it must be included. It must be included in the Braisa because the Braisa includes rechitza. So then, what was Tosfos talking about on Daf Yud Zayin, where Tosfos said that the Braisa doesn't mention kibbutz because it's not included in malacha? Tosfos just said it's included in rechitza. Second ha'ara. Thirdly, what does it mean that kibbutz is included in rechitza? What does that mean? What's the connection between kibbutz and rechitza at all? Rechitza is a tainug of the guf. Kibbutz, Rashi said, is because it's a malacha that's mesiach daitim and avelos. How do we understand Tosfos? So to be matzia, what Tosfos is mavur, and the Yesod Advar is mavur behemshech in the Matzeves Moshe. It's just an aricha, so we'll summarize it. Tosfos later on Daf Chav Dal Amud Beis, establishes a basic machloikes, Rashi and Tosfos, if an ovel is osir to wear begodim that were washed before the Yimei Avelos. We have the memory of Reb Chizda that we started with, the Gemara in Zayin Beis, that Zoyse Meres ovel osir b'tachbaises. What does that include? Does that mean only that the ovel can't do the maisa of kibbutz, or it's also for him to wear begodim mechubasim? So Tosfos on the Moed Katan in Chav Dal Amud Beis, Tosfos says, Pirush Bakunches, Rashi holds, the imbola hachlif begodim shekivsu koidim aregel lilbish begodim shemechubasim. An ovel who begins his avelos after Yontif, Chas v'shalom, someone who was maced during the regel. So Rashi says he can wear begodim that were washed before Yontif. On Chol HaMoed you can't wash, doesn't it? So Rashi says he can wear begodim that were washed before. What's important in Rashi is that Rashi holds an ovel can't wash during Zaynim Me'avelus, but has no issa to wear begodim that umechubas before. So Tisha says, Mashma Rashi hoya matir begodim shekibsu koidim aregel. Uba Tosfos Pirish, Tisha says no. He can only wear lebo lahachlif. The Gemara means lilbish begodim she'eno mechubasim. He can wear begodim that are not freshly laundered. Sometimes a cholok is put back and worn again without being laundered in between. So therefore, all the Gemara means to be matir is that an ovel after the regel has an eitzah to wear clean clothing, but that's not freshly laundered. So we have a basic machloikes, Rashi and Tosfos, if there's an isser on an ovel, besides to do the maisa of kibbutz, to wear begodim that were mechubas kaidim. And Tosfos is marich to establish that the Bali Tosfos are of the shita that it's also to wear begodim mechubasim kaidim. Machloikes Rashi Tosfos. The Ramban in Teras HaAdam asks a kushya tsuma on Rashi. And the kasha is from Inyana D'Yoyim. The kasha is from a din that we're familiar with. What's the din in Shiur Shechol Bo Ibn Egea to wearing begodim that are mechubas kaidim? Is it mutter or asa? It's asa. Begodim mechubasim kaidim is asa to be loivish, as they state in Medina the Gemara. The Ramban, we see therefore that in Shiur Shechol Bo, which that avelos is more kal than avelos shiva. HaRav, like we said, that melacha is mutter. And still we see that begodim mechubasim is aser, so kol sheken in avelos shiva, begodim mechubasim should be aser. It's a kushya tsuma that the Ramban in Teres HaAdam asks on Rashi. Let's see the lashon of the Ramban. It's copied below the Tosfos in Moed Katan is a lashon of the Ramban from the Sefer Teres HaAdam. If you look where the Ois Aleph is in brackets in the Ramban, so we have Osel Afal Pi.
Line 7.
Rav Yitzchak bar Giura Mishmeder B'Yochanan Afal Pi She'omru Kli Pishton Ein Behem Mishum Giyutz. Aval Osel Lelov Shom B'Shabbos Shechal Tisha B'Av Lias B'Seicha. One cannot wear big day pishton which are freshly laundered, even though big day pishton never are as perfectly refreshed with the process of giyutz like other begodim, but even the fact that they were just laundered makes them osser to wear b'shvur shechol boy. Ve'ein shiva shel avelos zot the Ramban. The shiva of Yemei Avelos pchusin, they're not less chomur mi shiva shel Tisha B'Av. Elo chamurim hem imenu b'kol makom. They're always more chomur. So zot the Ramban, from there we established that an ovel is osser to wear begodim mechubas. Zot the Ramban, ubenimuke hatzarfatim motzinu sherashi zal hitter lahachlif v'lilbosh b'shivas imei avelus cholok hamechubas kaidam nochein. Rashi was matter to wear a beged washed before ve'ein ze nochein shekesha omru osser b'kvisa. When Chazal established an ovel is osser to be mechabes begodim, loy lechabes bilvad omru. They didn't just mean to wash. If the issue would be just the act of kibbutz, then we wouldn't need the chiddush because that's osir atz malacha anyway. Faces his kasha. Ela she'osir lilboish included, and the ikir chiddush of an ovel being osir in kibbutz is that you can't wear begodim that are mechubas kaidem. As I frekt the Ramban on Rashi. And the Ramban fears at the end, close to the letter Beis in parentheses, Ve'afilu b'mechubosim b'Shabbos zu, kvisosim muterasi ela b'yomim shel shvisa u'mishum isam alocha. The isser of kibbutz has the chomer of isam alocha. Avol mishum avelos zot the Ramban ikar isser b'levisha. The ikar isser is the isser of levisha. So the Ramban has asked a kushya tsuma on Rashi. Now, before we come back to Miyasha or suggest the possible yishuv to Shitas Rashi, let's ask a kasha on Tosfos for a moment. We began our sugya with Tosfos' kasha. Tosfos asked the kushya tzuma. Why does Reb Chizda need a diuk and a chiddush and ovel is aser in kibbutz? Tepukle, it should be aser mishum malacha. We have a simple answer. The Ramban says the ikar iser of kibbutz by an ovel is the levisha of begodim mechubasim. So why didn't Tosfos say that? That's the Ramban's taina. He says we don't need a chidush of begadim mechubasim except for the Isser of Levisha, but never for the Isser of actually doing the Ma'aseh Kibbutz, because that's Nichal Malacha. The answer is that shayla is a mistake. Why? Because let's go back. The Chiddush of Reb Chizda that Kibbutz is also by an Ovel is based on the fact that a Ovel has a heter to wash on Chol HaMoed. So we're speaking about the Isser of the Ma'aseh of Kibbutz, not the Isser of wearing begadim mechubasim. If he had begadim mechubasim, he would wear those on Chol HaMoed. Elamai, he doesn't have begadim mechubasim. We're only speaking about the Ma'aseh Kibbutz. So Reb Chizda's actual memra, Zok must be speaking about the act of Kibbutz, which was Osir Erev Haregel and is Mutaneh. So that thesis doesn't have an Eitzah, except to say that it's not mentioned before in the Brisa. But the Ramban says, La'acha, that we've answered why Reb Chizda has to say it, Be'etzim Tesis is correct, that Lamaskana, it's included in the Isser of Malacha. Therefore, Lemaisa, the Ikir Chiddush of Kibbutz is to wear begadim mechubas. So we've established that Shittas HaTeisus is, Lafuke Rashi, that the Levisha of begadim mechubasim is also for an Aval, and the Raya is from Inyana de Yoima, where Shavua Shecholva should always be more kal, and we see that begadim mechubasim is also to be lovish. Possibly, and this is not really the Ikir Inyan, but just to mention as an aside, what we see from Shittas Rashi is that in certain respects, Shavua Shecholva is more chomor than Shiva Simei Avelos. Dugma Ladova. There is a broad suffix in the Achreinim. If there's a din of a chinuch of a cotton for Nihugei Avelos, there's a din which is brought in Shulchan Aruch that Lo Aleichem for cotton is an ovel, then one performs kriya on a cotton. Now, the poskim say, the Rishonim say, the reason is mipnei agmas nefesh, which the Rishonim explain means that when Le'alechem, people see a cotton with a beged korua, that's moisef in hesper. They state in the Rishonim. The Taz brings a Ritz Geyos, that the Ritz Geyos says the chiddush of performing kriya on a cotton is even if the cotton didn't reach the age of chinuch, because it's not for the cotton fulfilling the mitzvah of kriya, it's for others. But Zok the Ritz Geyos, once the cotton reaches the age of chinuch, then we have to be kireya to be mechanech the cotton, like we're mechanechim in any din d'Rabbanan. Zok the Taz and Siman Shin Mem and Yeridei and a cotton as a din of chinuch for all in the shach in the Kudas HaKesef, the Dogum Merevava. And the Pischei Tshuva points out that the Taz himself, later is mashma that that's his maskana, says that there's no chiyuv of chinuch by a cotton for Nihugei Avelos. The Ksav Sofer says in Tshuva that the svara is because man yemar rachman litzan will ever have to be Yoshev Shiva. So there's only chinuch on mitzvahs that you have to be mekayim. But Minchas Chinuch is doicha that svara in mitzvah reish samach dal, and he says the Kama Rayas that that's not correct. In Dogum Merevava is mavur a yisoid nifla. He says the reason is why we're not mechanech a cotton for Avelus is because of bittul Talmud Torah. As I say, bittul Talmud Torah. He says kriya is not mavatal the child from Talmud Torah. Baruch Frankel and Hagoysim Baruch Lamashal says that he won't be noel a sandal. He can go to rabbi like that too. But any nihugei avelus that would stop him being oisik in Talmud Torah is others. And the Imre Baruch says that the maskon of the shach is like that. So that's the shita of the shach, and that's the shita of the Dogum Merevavim. Either he's a kam of the Gedei Achreinim that the Imre Baruch mentions, Beroisham, the Beis Hillel, one of the Gedei Mefarshim Akadmonim on Yeridei, says no. The reason why the Be'etzem, a cotton, there's no din of chinuch of Avelos Bechlal. The Ritz Geyos is either saying a din miyuchad legabe kriya, or we don't paskin like the Ritz Geyos, but there's kama achronim that hold that there's no mitzvah of chinuch by Avelos Bechlal. The Mogen Avram in Hilchos Tisha B'Av in Inyana de Yoima asks a kasha. The Mechaber paskins that we don't give a haircut or wash the clothes of Ketanim during Shavuot Shecholvoi. Frek the Mogen Avram, there's no chinuch for Avelus for a cotton. So why can't we give a cotton a haircut? Why can't we be Mechabes these begodim? The Haydim Mavur in the Mogen Avram that the Mogen Avram held like the Beis Hillel, that Be'etzem there's no din of chinuch of Avelus by Ketanim B'chal, not just because of Bittul Talmud Torah. There's no din B'chal. Zokt the Mogen Avram. I found the Loshin in the Trumas Hadeshin in a different Indian. where the Trumas Hadeshen says b'soich dvorov that we're mechanech mipnei avelus and agmas nefesh. The Magen Avram. So why by all avelus aren't we mechanech mipnei agmas nefesh? Zot the Magen Avram because avelus the rabbim is mocham. Shvur shechol ba is mocham. The pshuta state in Magen Avram an example of where the avelus of shvur shechol ba has a greater chomer than the avelus of zayin. It's just as an aside, and again, it's really not directly our Indian. It's an aside. I think if one's ma'ayin in the lashon of the Aruch HaShulchan, I have to know. The Aruch HaShulchan bavarns this, and he says the Magen Avram doesn't mean because the avelus of shvur shechol ba is more chomer. Because matzinu b'chol mokom that adarabah the avelus of shvur shechol ba is kal. It's the Ramban. So the Aruch HaShulchan, it means adarabah mipnei agmas nefesh means to help everyone else in Klal Yisrael enhance the avelus of shvur shechol ba. So memela we make the ketanim also be mekayim avelus. Dugmas the svar of the rishonim of mekarim lekoton chas v'shalom kedei. So perhaps if you're the Aruch HaShulchan, the Magen Avram wouldn't be a raya. But the Fumriyata, the Machshovah of the Magen Avram is that in certain aspects, the din of Shvur Shechol Ba can be more chomer than Avelus of Zayin. So that's a possible yishuv for Shittas Rashi, where Rashi holds that we find, for Shittas Rashi, a chomer miyuchedes in Shvur Shechol Ba that you cannot wear begodim mechubasim, which by ordinary Avelus Shiva, Rashi is makel. Now that we've established that Shittas HaTosfos is that the wearing of begodim mechubasim is asa. Now we can go back to the Tosfos Chafal from the days, where Tosfos asks a kasha and says that kibbutz is absent from the Braisa on Daf Chaf but it doesn't mention kibbutz. So we didn't understand what the kasha is. It's nichal melocha. Tosfos says it's nichal rechitza. Tosfos before said it's nichal melocha. We bechal didn't understand how it's nichal rechitza. Zot the Matzeves Moshe a pashta eitza. Tosfos Daf Chaf means a different rechitza and a different kibbutz. Tosfos means not the isser of doing the ma'aseh kibbutz. Tosfos means the isser of wearing begodim mechubasim. That's what Tosfos is asking, that the Brisa doesn't mention the isser of wearing begodim mechubasim either. Of them zok Tosfos wearing begodim mechubasim, that's a different isser. That isn't because of melacha, and it's not because of Mesiach Daitam and Avelus. What is the reason why you can't wear begodim mechubasim? The Ramban emphasizes ikar ha'issa b'levishahi. Why? Why can't an over wear begodim mechubasim? Zok Tosfos, the reason is because there's a tainug in wearing begodim mechubasim. Where's the makar for an ovel's isser in tainug? Zok Tosfos, the makar is from rechitza. Nifla. Tosfos and Daf Chaf Aleph and Tosfos and Yudzayin and Beis are talking about two different isurim in the din of kibbutz. Tosfos on Daf Yudzayin that asks that kibbutz should be included in melacha is speaking about the ma'aseh kibbutz. And that be'emes we could be matir mitzat tzorchei aguf. And the maskana is that adarabah is the kibbutz is more chomer because we see it's also b'shur shechol boy. Tosfos Chaf Aleph is asking a different shayla. Tosfos Chaf Aleph is asking there's an isser of wearing begodim mechubasim. That isser is not an isser of melacha, that belongs to something else. Zok Tosfos, that's included in rechitza. If it's included in rechitza, then of course it doesn't have a heter of tzorchei aguf.
No pasuk for wearing mechubasim, right?
So Zok the Matzeves Moshe Adarabah, the mashmos of the Gemara on Daf Tesvav is, and we'll see that, and at Kodmoy already in the Sefer in the Chuvas Lachmi Toida, that if one's medayik in the Gemara, the mashmos of the Gemara is the Joshua for the Issa wearing begodim mechubasim. But we'll come back to that Be'ez Hashem if we have time. Shvur Shechol Ba. The Ramban's Raya. Yeah, the Ramban's Raya. Yeah. Correct. The Ramban? The Ramban brings that raya, yeah. Tosfos just says it's a kol sheken, yeah, which Matzeves Moshe says really means the same raya. Correct. So that's the beer that the Matzeves Moshe's Matzia, beer nifla on Tosfos Chaf Aleph, that we're speaking about a different aspect of the Isser of Kibbutz, which is the Isser of wearing begodim mechubasim, and that is learnt from the Isser of Rechitza. Dahainu, the Isser of wearing begodim mechubasim is a specific tainug, and that's the Isser that encompasses also the Isser of begodim mechubasim. So Adkan is what's mavur in the Shittas Rishonim. Now, Tosfos at the very end of Tosfos on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph gives an eitza l'shita soy for an ovel to wear begodim mechubasim. What's the eitza? The eitza is miu zewa minag ato shemalbishin oisei la'odam acher yoyim oy chatzi yoyim ve'im ze kori beged mechubas. We give it for someone else to wear for half a day or a day, and that takes off the din of a beged mechubas. That's what Tisha says. Now, there is a mevucha in the Rishonim whether lemaisa this heter could be used even during Shiva, which is mavur from Taisis L'chura, it can be, or it could only be used during Shloshim. Until now, we've been discussing all Shiva lo aleichem. There's a machloikas harishonim if from Shiva until the end of Shloshim, there's an isser of kibus and wearing begodim mechubasim. Some Rishonim hold there's no makar for the isser b'chlal, and other Rishonim hold that there is. The Tur brings that the minig is to be machmir, that there's an isser of kibus and wearing begodim mechubasim toich shloshim. On that, the smak brings an eitzah that an odom acher can be loivish to begodim. Odom acher can be loivish to begodim. So on the second page of the Maramakoimus, the Tshuvas Lachmei Toida, that's on the Mari Basan. The Tshuvas Lachmei Toida brings from the Mari Kash, from the Sefer Erech Lechem, who writes that the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch bring, that one can wear begodim mechubasim as an eitzah through an Adam Acher being loivish, that doesn't just apply in Shloshim, but it applies during Shiva also. Frek the Lachmei Toida, it's mavur both in the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch that this heter was only ever said in Shloshim, never in Shiva. What's the reason to be mechalik? So Zok the Lachmei Toida, the reason is Pashat. In Shiva, which lekule alma has an isser of wearing begodim mechubasim, then avada we're not going to be seimach on the kula of Tosfos to wear a beged shalov shoyacher. But during Shloshim, which is a machloikis harishonim, if bichlal is an isser to wear begodim mechubasim, so then we can be seimach on the eitzah of begodim mechubasim, and that's why the rishonim that the Tur quotes only invoke the eitzah of begodim shalov shomacher for Shloshim and not for Shiva. So Mamela, and it's a davar nifla to see that the Lachmei Toida wrote this tshuva after he got that from his own Shiva lo aleichem. He wrote that when he was in Ovel, he saw Piskei Halachos in Hilchos Avelos, and he saw that this Erech Lechem is brought, and he said from what he remembered from the Sugya that Erech Lechem is shver, but he couldn't be Oisek in the Shaila during Yemei Avelos because Ovel is Aseh b'Talmud Torah. So as soon as I finished Avelos, I went back to the Sugya, and I'm coming to the Yash of the Erech Lechem. It's mamash happened then. So Mamela, the Lachmei Toida, to explain the heter of the Erech Lechem, says the following insight. And he says that even though there seems to be a machloikis harishonim, if we can use the eitzah of begodim shalov shoy odom acher during Shiva or not, which seemingly is a machloikis between Tosfos who says it is an eitzah and the smak who says it's not an eitzah and only an eitzah during Shloshim. So Zok the Erech Lechem, this is on page 2 on the left-hand column of the Tshuvas Erech Lechem, and if I have a chance, we'll come to see the earlier part of the Lachmei Toida by Machshovah. He says like this: the Rishonim are referring to two different cases. There's really no machlekes. Tosfos that has the eitzah of begodim shalov shel adam acher is talking about one case, and the smak that only brings the eitzah of adam shel of lov shel adam acher for shloshim is talking about a separate case. What are the two cases? Zok there. The Tosfos the Mairi Toich Zayin, Tosfos that's matir Toich Zayin, loy Airi elo b'mishem machluf l'tzoyrech. It means the beged has become slightly soiled, and he has a reason why he wants to change the beged. The afal pikein, and still Zok Tosfos ein lo lahachlif ki im b'shenu odam acher. The hapoiskim, meaning the smak and the tur, de loy hitiru elo la'achar zayin Mairi b'machlif l'tainug. He wants to change his clothes simply because he wants to. He wants to wear a fresh shirt. Shaharei l'kulu rabavusa, because according to all Rishonim, la'achazayin muta b'kibus l'chatchila. Be'etzem, the haskam of the poskim is really l'chatchila kibus u'bimuta. Ule sapkile, because the smak has a suffix, so memele he allows to change just for the purpose of tainug, as long as an Adam Acher was leivish to beged. What does it help that an Adam Acher was leivish to beged? So if we look to the right, in the second paragraph of the Tshuvas Lachmei Toida, he says The nina ga'olam lahate belevishas adam acher lefisha mevatel chashivus hakibus. It doesn't have that same tainug of fresh from the laundry. Someone else has worn it. So memele toich shloishim, where really the isser of wearing bigodim mechubasim is a chumrah. So mele we're matir as long as an adam acher took it, it was levish, because that removes it the status of the beged, the chashivus of a beged mechubas. That's that thing. But he says v'hovadei de toich zayin. But certainly in Shiva, we certainly can be makel lemishrei lahachlif kishut tzorech lekach mishum tinu. Let's say the beged got slightly soiled. There are vada we can be matter. Why? And here's the all-important nekuda, the lomdus that the Lachmei Toida is megala in the sugya. He says, "Shaharei rechitza v'sicha kolshehu." A person is able to both do rechitza and sicha shu lahaver hazuama if it's to take off some dirt, mutter. Even further than that, demand the islay erbuvia bereishe. If someone has an irritation in their hair, they can even wash their hair with hot water. Toisvis in elu megalchem. Vikvar kotzwa toises al perik elu megalchem. The brisa the elu dvarim like choshuv tachboises. The reason why the brisa doesn't bring the isser of wearing begodim mechubasim is because of what? Mishum dehave bichlal rechitza u'k'moishe iskarnu le'el hareshal cholef onecha the tachboises lesed rechitza hi elo shezeh begodim v'zeh beguf. The isser of rechitza is like a person can't refresh his guf. He can't wear fresh begodim. But whatever rechitza would be mutter, avada wearing begodim mechubasim would be mutter also. Memele zot the Lachmei Toida, when Toises is makel to wear begodim mechubasim teich zayin, it means where there's a tzorech. Why then are we matzrich the levish of adam acher? Because since we have an eitzah not to be matir, wearing a beggar that's mechubas legamre, if we don't need to be makel entirely in the isser b'chitza, maybe we don't need to. For example, if a person is able to be roichet just b'tzoinen and not b'chamin, to be matir the chatotim sheberoishe, we won't be matir chamin. So here, if we have an eitzah to wear a beggar that's not completely with the chashivos of kibus, so maybe we'll be makel to wear a beggar. We'll be makel that far. Therefore, what the Lachmei Toida has been mechadish is this: that the isser of wearing begodim mechubasim is mutter wherever rechitza is mutter. And therefore, avada mi'ikar adin, there's a heter to wear begodim mechubasim mipnei tinuf. And that we're mechadish, that you need lov shei adam acher, is only because there's a mokum to say that we shouldn't take the heter for an oifen of more than what we need. Zok there, now we understand the psak of the erech lechem. The reason why it carries over the heter to shiva is poshut, because there's no svara that it shouldn't. The whole isser of wearing beged mechubas can't be muchomer than the isser of rechitza. So mele one can be machlis begodim mitzarech. Now let's go a step further, Ladina. Kum d'chais. Be'etzem, what the Lachmei Toida is saying is that the mokum that the person has likluch begodim, there is no reason why he can't be machlis begodim ikradin, and lov shel adam acher is an eight. So luyutzu, there wasn't the possibility of lov shel adam acher. Or the way the Aruch HaShulchan says that bizmanenu, we're not makpid on lov shel adam acher by our velus, because it's mo'us for a person, for someone else to wear the begodim. And therefore the Aruch HaShulchan says we have the heter of wearing begodim mechubasim even without lov shel adam acher. Me'ikradin, b'mokum that it's the chiluf of the begodim is not done l'tainug, but because of tinuf, me'ikradin, one can be machlef begodim. And this Lachmei Toida is brought lahalacha by the Pischei Tshuva, bottom right of the Mar Mekaymes on page 2. He says, Ayin b'shut Lachmei Toida shehelo delodo hitiru ela la'achazayin, even though the place can only mention lov shem adam echa after shiva, hainu dafka b'machlef l'tainug. That's only in a case where it's been done l'tainug. Avali machlef l'tzoyrech gon shachiluk meluchlech oy mishum merbuv yeshari afilu b'choil teich shiva al yedei kach by odam acher k'moi berechitza deloy oser ela shal tainug. Umashaloi bo hadover hazeh mefurish v'paiskim zot the Pischei Tshuva ein ze elo l'roiv pshitusoi. Anyone who knows the sugyas of the Pischei Tshuva will know that the issue of wearing begodim mechubasim is learned from rechitza. So how can it be mocham? Now, let's now summarize what we have. We've reached the point in the sugya that based on the chiluk that we made between the two Teisasin, we had that the Isser of Kibbutz is Mishum Malacha. Like the Matzeves Moshe pointed out, it's actually a Malacha Chamura because it's Mesiach Daitim and because Malacha Shal Simcha. Wearing begodim mechubasim doesn't belong to that din. Horaya, that it's not mutal tzarchei aguf, it's a different Isser, which is Mishum Tainug. Zok the lachmei toida mimele beikar hadin chiluf begodim shaloi letainug mipnei tinuf ulichluch is mutter. Just the Rishonim add that if one has an eitzah to remove the chashivas of the beged mechubas, so therefore there's not a need to be matter more. What about actually being allowed to be mechabes teich shiva if I don't have a clean beged to wear? We said to switch begodim and to wear a beged mechubas. Midina is mutter if it's not done l'shem taina. What about rechitza? What about kibbutz itself? I apologize. The ma'aseh of kibbutz itself. L'chara, we would say the ma'aseh kibbutz itself. That's not osir mipnei tainug. That's osir because it's malacha shel simcha of mesiach daitim and avelos. So now we have no hechrach from everything the lachmei toida established that mi'ikar adin chiluf begodim is mutter shaloi l'tainug to being matter the ma'aseh kibbutz. But we find that in Pischei Tshuva, just below the piece of paragraph of Pischei Tshuva that we just saw, in Shin Pei Aleph, in the Siman in Yer there, which is Isaac in the Isser of kibbutz, the Isser of Rechitza, I apologize, where the Shulchan Aruch brings this halacha that someone who has irbuvia bereishe, someone has an irritation in their head, can wash even bechamin. Kosa b'sefer dan Chamudei Daniel ksav yad. The Chamudei Daniel says, near the kol shekei misha yeshlo irbuvia b'mono. If he has irbuvia in his clothing, shori bekibus, it's mutter for him to wash. The ha'isa b'nedarim, because there's a sugi in Nedarim adaf pei aleph, the irbuvia demona gorim ireshe. The Gemara in Nedarim says mefurish that unclean clothes is more distressing for a person to wear than having an unclean guf. And he said to Machlokes Tanoim in the Gemara in Nedarim pei aleph. Memele zok the Chamudei Daniel, kibbutz is also mutter. Now l'chara it's lepela. Irbuvia dereisha is matir rechitza. Why? Because rechitza is an isser of tainug, and therefore where it's not done letainug, but it's done mishum irbuvia, it's like garamistinus, like the Lachmei Toida said. Maybe the Lachmei Toida extends that to the isser of wearing begodim michubasim, which also Tisha says is also mishum rechitza, and therefore is only mishum tainug, and therefore mishum tinuf, which is not letainug, is mutter. But how can we be matter the ma'aseh? The ma'aseh is a different isser. It's a malacha shesh by simcha mipnei shemasiach daitim and avelos. How did the Chamudei Daniel carry over this heter? So possibly we could be matzia based on what we began the sugya with the Yad David. We began the sugya that Tosfos be'etzem as a shakla v'taria.
What's the kasha that was answering that?
The kasha we're trying to answer is the following: we have seen in the Chamudei Daniel, Pischei Tshuva is Metzayin, in the end of the piece in Shin Pei Tes, that after he brings the heter of the Lachmei Toida to be makel on wearing begodim mechubasim shaloi l'shem tainug bat mipnei tinuf v'lichluch, the Chamudei Daniel uses seemingly that same heter to carry over from rechitza of irbuvia bereisha to actual kibbutz, and that we're asking the heter doesn't follow from riyato. The Gemara in the Nedarim is establishing that because a person has irbuvia and it disturbs him, it's not rechitza shel tainug. But kibbutz is an osir mepnei tainug. Kibbutz is also because of a malacha shesh by simcha. Shemasiach daitim and avelos. We'll remember the Tosfos that we began with. That Tosfos says madoch malacha is also kol sheken kibbutz. We could approach the shaila based on the Yad David, and say that be'etzem there would have been a havamina to say that even though from Shvuah Shechol Bo we see that kibbutz is more chomer than shar malachas, because in Shvuah Shechol Bo malacha is mutter, but kibbutz is aser. But Zot the Yad David, there's the opposite svara that we should be matter kibbutz mipnei tzarchei aguf. Zok the Chamudei Daniel, avada we don't mean to extend directly that because rechitza mishum irbuvia is mutter and the vishas begodim mechubasim is mutter mishum tinuf memele kibbutz is mutter. It means to say like this: if we see that irbuvia demona is more chomer than even irbuvia dereisha, we could be matter the melacha mipnei tzarech aguf. We have no right to say that kibbutz is always aser, despite tzarchei aguf in every case. There'll be cases where we could be matter again kibbutz mishum tzarchei aguf. How do we know that this tzarech aguf is so acute? The answer is because we see it's a kol sheken from irbuvia demon. from a buvia duration. The hainu, the tsar, the Gemara says it's goyim lidei shiamum. The tsar that beged the buvia bebegodim is goyim means that the chai gavanu can have heter tsar. Memele, in that case, the chamudi daniel, we can extend the iser to kibbutz itself. Extend the heter, to kibbutz itself. So nimtzeinu lemeidim from the halachas of avelus shiva aleichem, which is built, as the Ramban says, from the halachas of Shiur shechol boy, that b'mokum that a person who wants to change his beged, or even needs to be mechabes his beged mishum tinuf, me'ikra din, it's mutter. So kum d'chais. That if someone wants to change to a beged mechubas in Shiur shechol boy, which the Ramban says kipshuto is more kal than avelus, and he doesn't have the eitzah of lov shoy odam acher, or like the Aruch HaShulchan says, it's mos to him. L'chari, he could wear a beged mechubas. Or if he doesn't have an option of continuing to wear the beged metunuf that he has, and he doesn't have another not freshly laundered beged that's clean, he could do it. So too, if someone has run out of clean clothing, l'chur lefi the chamudi daniel, he should be mutter to be mechabes. It's begodim. Should be mutter to be mechabes. So that's what should be mavur ledina.
And why shouldn't Adam Acher help during Tisha?
Why shouldn't?
What about the Mari's kasha?
Because who do you want in Shiur shechol boy to wear your begodim? Anyone else is also also to wear a beged mechubas. What?
Oh, God.
Yeah. I found the Tshuvas Minchas Yitzchak that Lehedya makes this cheshbon, and he says about in Shiur shechol boy lov she'odam acher means there's no eitzah. He doesn't even have a havamina of giving it to a guy. We don't need the kula of the Aruch HaShulchan to say ich gehe nicht geben mein Hemmet to
Machshovah to decide. But Tisha does help.
What? Because an Adam Acher can do it. Because when Adam Acher was not an oval,
that chal on the shirt.
I'm sorry.
That chal on the shirt.
Yeah. So besides Aruch HaShulchan who says that Ledina we're not noig to be makbid on that because Ledidan we're istinis in legabe that, but homias Ledina lechura that it should what should be mavur mitoich lelachmei toida, that someone who wants to wear a beged mechubas during Shiur shechol boy and then there's no eights of an Adam Acher being levish can wear a beged mechubas if the only other beged he has is matunaf.
Maybe the African minute can Sfardi wear it during his after his chodesh. Not yet his Sfardi.
I hear. We are even in that case. I hear. Okay, we'd have the eitzah. Who adin? If someone doesn't have any begodim that are clean, if all his begodim become matunaf, then you would even have a heter to be mechabes. You would have a heter to be mechabes. L'chara is mavur. If you what? Of what? Of preparing begodim in advance? Sorach ion in the poskim if we're mechuyev to do that. Are we mechuyev? Person who didn't prepare and now he has no eight, so there's a knas of a pesheya. We need chazal to be mechadash a knas of a pesheya. Why are we makbid to use this eight of lov shei adam acher kodim, which is really us? Well, we're loivish our own begodim because based on this pischei tshuva, we want to wear begodim mechubasim during Shiur shechol boy, and like the lachmei toida cheshbons, we don't want to use that heter more than we have to, so lechatchila we meichen. But it's a lechatchila. I don't know that we are able to say pshir in that case. So kum l'chais ledina, the way it's mavur from the sugya, if we run out of begodim mechubasim, or we have no eitzah but to wear a beged mechubas, and lov she'odam acher is not an eitzah, perhaps in the Shlomo's case of the difference between from Rosh Chodesh until Shiur shechol boy and then Shiur shechol boy for Ashkenazim and Sfardim, we don't have an eitzah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Ledidan eventually I beg it becomes Nitzlach. Now Rabbi said, what's the what would be the eight salamais if one's going to be mechabes? Oh, so we'll get to that. I don't know if we'll have a chance to get to that, but that's what would come out. Now, what's the kushiatzum on this? The kushiatzum on this is that the poskim discuss in Hilchos Tisha the din of misha ein lecholuk echad. Someone only has one shot, right? Which means he's regularly laundering and wearing the same shot. What's the din of misha ein lecholuk echad if he can be mechabes it or not? So on the first page of where the Shiur is outlined, does the Ilm have the first sheet, Shlomo?
Yeah.
The sheet of the outline of the Shiur? Yeah. Yes. So on the bottom left is copied a Bir Alocha. It's copied a Bir Alocha. What steht the Bir Alocha? The Bir Alocha is discussing the Ramah, which is what was Shlomo pointing out before, that Anan B'nei Ashkenaz are machmir on everything from Rosh Chodesh, not just Shiur shechol boy. So Zot the Bir Alocha Rotzoloyma B'chol Ha'amar Le'el B'tchilas HaSif, everything. Dahainu, including the Isser of Kibus Begodim. Zog the Biur Halacha, there's one exception. Someone who only has a chaluk echod can wash until Shvuah Shechol Boy. Like the Eli Rabbah says, and who paskins like that? So the Biur Halacha, the Makar is from a Chayil. Now he brings that it's mutter the whole Shvuah, even Shvuah Shechol Boy. So the Biur Halacha, it can't be. He meant that. It can't be. B'tzarech loymar ad Shabbos. Hella, chaluk echad. Well, what do we expect from him? What do we expect? It's pasha what the Pischei Olam is saying. Now the issue is because the pashas of the Gemara is mashma that misha in the chaluk echad is mashma that even shvuah shechol bay can't be reichet. So shout out to learn the Gemara. But the Biur Halacha says with the taikif there's no heter misha in the chaluk echad.
Changing the words from Shchedish till ad Shabbos.
Yeah, it's magia the Pischei Olam. It's a toast. Right? It's a toast. Yeah, change it. It's toast. It's mekos. It's pasha. That's one kasha. The second shaila is the shaila of the Baal Minchas Yitzchak, the Rav Yerushalayim, where he asks from a Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says, coming up now, he brings a Magen Avram. The Ramah says that on Shabbos Shel Chazoin, ein machlifim lilboish bigdei Shabbos ki maksoines levad. We only on machlif. We don't change to bigdei Shabbos. We're machlif the ksoines, a machlif the undergarment, the garment that's carved to the basa. Zog the Magen Avram, umuter afilu chol Tisha B'av b'Shabbos. There's no makom to be machmer, even if Tisha B'av was chal on Shabbos. V'hamachmer shalei lachlifo is someone who's machmer not to change the ksoines minik shtusu. Why? She'enu lovush rak mipnei hazeya. Because the whole ksoines is there to absorb zeya, so a beggar that's full of zeya one changes. The Minchas Yitzchak l'chorla mavur le'el. According to the Lachmei Toida, the fact that a beggar has now been sweated in shouldn't be worse than if it got dirty. Anytime you should be able to be machlif. Zok there, hella zok the Minchas Yitzchak, and it's based on how we learned in the sugya. We'll possibly have a mokum iyun on this Minchas Yitzchak. He says, "Ela shezeh kosher," and that goes back to the svara you were being matzia. Ela dezeh kosher. Why? Because the gamshom the lachmei toida be'avelos was only matir. Ela begadne she'acher yulbeshenu koidem. He was only matir like Toisus, where someone else would wear it. Vim came betisha ba'abdullah shayich heter zeh. You can't get someone else to wear it b'shvuah shechol boy. Darei kulam asurim b'levishas beged mechubas l'chein lo yitiru el l'tzorech Shabbos. And what's Minchas Yitzchak answering? In the Chanami, of course you can change a beggar l'tzorech, but only if Lov Sheh Adam Acher first. It's l'pele. Lov Sheh Adam Acher is really just a way of minimizing what should be a much broader heter of being machlif begodim shalei l'tainuk is mutter. Zokta lachmei toida, but if you don't have to go so far, and you can minimize the shem kibus by an Adam Acher, but let's say you can't. Baruch HaShulchan himself says lahedya that bizmanenu that we can't, you can wear without it. So l'churla from Riyato, the way we've learned the sugya, l'chara tzarich bir possibly what the Minchas Yitzchak means. But homius we have a shayla now on the Magen Avram too. That what if you're machlif in pnei hazeya, we have the same shayla of chaluk echad that should be mutter without all the heterim. So heichon notzinu yodeinu v'ragleinu, that it seems to be that in the dinim of shvuah shechol boy we have a tzad chomer that doesn't seem to be justified mitich the dinim of avei. Is this another instance where we see that the Avelos of Shvuah Shechol becomes muchamer than Avelos Shiva? L'chayra, this would be a. I apologize. So this is a basic question that you can ask the shita of the Hilchos should be reviewed. How do you understand Mishaim Chalak Echad and the din of the Magen Avram? That Shirachak was left from the Sinta can be an iron in the Sukkot. I haven't found that. Is that better now? Can it be heard?
We hear you now. We don't hear you again.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Yeah, we audible?
We hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, just l'chomer akushyo, possibly we could be matzia that Tesis we saw in Mayit Cotton on Daf Chavdaldim Bey said that the minig was biyomehem that a choluk was a choluk who malbush v'regilim l'lovshoy ulahachlif beloy kibbutz. A choluk could be left a certain amount of time without a kibbutz. It wasn't that each time a choluk was taken off, it was immediately washed and then only worn again. Sometimes a choluk was left without being washed. Similar to the way we, let's say, would do with a suit, where we'd launder it or clean it only, from time to time. Then perhaps we can be matzia that misha yeshli choluk echad doesn't mean that the choluk is now matuna for malei. It means because he doesn't have a choluk, he has a choluk echad, he's mechabes it regularly. He doesn't wear the choluk once, put it back, not mechubus, wear a second choluk, put it back, not mecholos, and rotate. Because he only has one choluk, he launders it regularly, not necessarily because it comes matuna from Malizeya, because simply that's a minig in the begodim. Misha yeshle choluk echad is a kula that because that's the usual routine of his kibbutz, when he is being mechabesit, it's not a special malach of simcha, but it's routine. Memela misha yeshle choluk echad is a kula that until shvur shechol boy, he can be mechabes even not necessarily l'tzoyrech of zeya or tinov, because choluk echad is the routine. It's not a bezunder simcha of laundry day. Masha'ein kain in the tzir of someone whose beged actually became a luchlach with tinov and zeya, avada he can be roikatzet. And memelu hu adin, well, perhaps that's the same as the Magen Avram, that lovush mipnei hazeya doesn't mean that now it's filled with zeya. It means the routine was that begodim that generally a woman mipnei hazeya were laundered regularly, whether or not they were particularly matunuf or not. Something where the routine was to launder regularly has a cooler. After that we could be matzia, possibly l'chaymer akushil. But kum d'chayz l'dina. Someone wants to be machlef a beged l'churab lulev the minchas yitzchak, and again it's lulev the minchas yitzchak, the minchas yitzchak, to wear a beged mechubos that when one's machlef b'nei atinov is mutter because there's no eitz of love she'al damacher, and who adin it will be mutter to be mechabes if there's no eitz of having begodim without lichluch, and kipshutoi that would be an adifus to mechabes alidei akum because it minimizes the masiyach daitim and avelos, although I didn't see that brought lehedir in the Paiskim. L'didan, we add the tzad of the kula that we have washing machines anyway, so we're not oisik b'yodaim. There's not the same extent of masiyach daitim and avelos, but that would be ladina. And I heard from Mari Chami Shlita that this shaila was asked to Ramosha Lehedia. If someone has run out of clean clothes, he was asked in camp. If someone has run out of clean clothes, what's the eitz? And Ramosha said it's poshut, that it was not nichal and ladina of avelos that the person has to wear begodim to nothing. And like we said and that's the Yisayda Dvarim is the lachmi toida. There was never a din that a person has to wear. It's not more chomer than the din of rechitza. And we'll just conclude with a fascinating shaila which Rabbi Yashiv and Shmuel
goes off this topic. The Rav mentioned earlier, our shirts considered to be big desire too. Do you hear somebody quoted Ramosha?
Yeah.
Daniel quoted Ramosha to that effect.
Yeah, Ledidan, correct. I believe that Mipi Shmuel Ramosha. That I did not hear Mari Chami, but I believe it's Mipi Shmuel from Ramosha. Yeah, but I can't vouch for it personally. I don't know. I know it's Ibadja Bebei Midrasha, but I don't know personally.
He heard directly from David so it makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. So now, just as one shaila, there's a fascinating nidin. If it's better for a person to buy new begodim, which Medina the Gemara is also awesome, or was it better for him to be mechabes? Which one? So I would just mention one svara, which I believe is a milsa de mistabra, and I've reviewed it with the Daily Apaiskim, and I think it was agreed that a person isn't mechuyev to spend money for begodim that he won't need afterwards in order to avoid kibbutz. If he needs extra begodim and would buy anyway, then we have a need in which one is odif, and we can discuss the stardom of the shayla. But be'etzem, if a person doesn't need those begodim and is only buying them to avoid kibbutz, the person's not mechuyev to make tzihitzois in order to be able to avoid what is Medina is mutter.
It goes to his question. There's no Medina pshia if you don't have the
So
thing.
Chalamayid is mochamer because Chalamayid the Isser B'chitz is Medina and we don't have a heter of Tzorach. That's not called a dover of it. If you need begodim now and you happen to be without an eitzah because of Gzeres Chazal, that's not called a dover of it. If a person runs out of clean begodim and Chalamayid the eitzah is he has to, except in certain circumstances, the eitzah is he has to buy. This concludes B'siyata Dishmaya, the chelik halacha of the Shiur, and apologize that we're being mekatzer somewhat different to the Reb Shlomo's request of more of an arichas and divrei agada because of the Yom Tisha B'av. It's difficult to be marich in divrei agada in the minyanim of Eivel. So perhaps instinctively we're going to be mekatzer in the divrei agada, but just to mention a nekuda which emerges from the lashonis of the Rambam in the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph Hilchos Melachim. The Rambam describes to us what the emuna in Bias HaMashiach includes. Rabbi Yitzchak, you can bring it closer. It's fine. Bring the recorder closer. It's fine. The Rambam says the following: HaMelech HaMashiach osid lamoid. The Melech HaMashiach is osid to be oimid. Ulehachzir malchus beis David liyoshna lememshala harishayna. One task that the Bias HaMashiach is to accomplish is the Chazar of Malchus Beis David. Melech HaMashiach is Neitzah Lebeis Yishai. That's one mitzvah. The second is Boina HaMikdash. Right? There's a Mashayla in the Yerushalmi, in Zroim, if the Binyan HaMikdash is before Bias HaMashiach, after Bias HaMashiach, the Rambam Paskins, one of the dinim is that the Melech HaMashiach will be Boina HaMikdash, and the third is Mekabetz Nidchei Yisrael. Kibbutz of Goliath. Those are the three components which the Rambam says are going to be accomplished by the Melech HaMashiach who's Osid Lamoid. Now, then the Rambam says the following: the mishpat of the Sanhedrin will be chayzer. Makrivim karbonos, there'll be a mikdash, will be makriv karbonos. But oisim shmitim v'yovelos kechol mitzvah hamuras b'Torah. Why? Because since there'll be kibbutz nidchei Yisrael, there'll be rov yeshvei aleah, and the minyan of shmitim v'yovelos will be reinstated. Now the Rambam Firzoi says, "Kol mi she'einu maimin boy, or mi she'einu mechake lebiyosoi, chas v'sholom leb'shanavim u'koifer b'teres Moshe Rabbeinu," and the Rambam is marich on the emunah and Bias HaMashiach. Now, seemingly from the structure of this halacha, the Rambam is mavur that when we're coming to establish the fact that it's mi'ikra emunah to be maimin and Bias HaMashiach, we need to know what being maimin and Bias HaMashiach means. What does that mean? What's going to happen? So the Rambam therefore has listed Bias HaMashiach means Chazor of Malchus Beis David, Binyan HaMikdash, and Mekabetz Nidchei Yisrael. Those are all aspects and facets of Bias HaMashiach. But Im Kedem Advarim, which is the straightforward reading of the Rambam, then why does the Rambam then say Choizim Kol HaMishpatim, Makrivim Karbonos, Oisim Shmitim V'Yovelos? That's not the function of Bias HaMashiach. When the Melech HaMashiach is born, he will be Maimed Malchus Beis David. He will be Boina the Mikdash. He will be Mekabetz Nidchei Yisrael. Those are tasks and dinim of the Melech. Now, of course, it follows that once there's a Mikdash, there'll be Karbonos. Once Klal Yisrael are there, there'll be Moinish Shmitim V'Yovelos. Once there could be a Sanhedrin at some Mikdash. That's not primarily the task of Melech HaMashiach, not what we ordinarily understand. But what's Mavur in Rambam is that's not correct. The Gemara, so to speak, the climax, the pinnacle of what Chazara of Malchus Beis David will be is Kedei, like the Rambam says, Kechol Mishpatei HaTorah, is to bring back the shleimus of the kiyum of Mitzvah HaTorah. That's what we're being mekake for. It's not just Memela that when there'll be a Mikdash, there'll be Makriv Karbonos. Memela when there'll be Reish Ve'ela Isim Yoivleis. And Memela there'll be Chayzer Kol HaMishpatim Shoyim Mikedem. The klal advarim is that nichlal in the seder of Bias Mashiach is mitzvahs that the Melech will do, but the matorah of those mitzvahs is because what we are actually being mechake for is the chazorah of kol mitzvah shel Torah. That's actually what we chaser, and that's actually what we're being mechake mechake for. We are being mishtoikik for the chazorah of all the mishpatei Torah. What's being mitzaras begolus, says the Rambam, is that we can't be makriv karbanos. What's being mitzaras is that we can't be moinish from the yovelis. What's being mitzaras is v'choizim kol mishpatim b'yom k'shayim together. And it's mavur mitich the seder shmona esrei like that. To kabe sheifa gadol cheiruseinu, v'sanes l'kabetz galuyesinu, kaptzenu yachal ne'arba kreivizar. What's the next bracha? Shiur sheftenu k'varishayinu v'yatzenu k'vatchila. Asim yogim v'anacha. We want the chazara of the kiyum of mishpat in Klal Yisrael, which means after kibbutz nidchei Yisrael, which is the last in the seder of the Rambam of Beina Mikdash, and then mekabetz nidchei Yisrael, what we want is the chazara of mishpatei HaTorah. Be'ikr, what we chaser in Golus is the fact that Torah can't be makuyim b'shleimus. Malkeo v'soreo bagoyim ein Torah. So the header that we have from Golus is that we lack the ability to be makayim mishpatei shel Torah. That's what we're being mistaken for. We can learn say the Zroim, we can learn say the Kodshim, we can learn say the Tyrus, half of Shas. And what we're left with is a gaping void, believe, Mosai Oviliyodi, Vakayimenu. Roiv Gufei Torah, Allah Halacha, V'loy L'maisa. What we're being mistaken for Zot the Rambam is Avada, we want Bias, we want Beina Mikdash, Umakabetz in Chesra. But what is Nichlal in that? Is because you want all Mishpatei Shel Torah to be able to be Chayzer. What we're yearning for is to be able to be Mekayim Mishpatei HaTorah. The Lashon of the Rambam later is in the end of Perek Beis, and it's more barichas in the Machshovah. Lo nisavu hachachamim v'neviim yimayis HaMashiach lo kedei yishlutu al kol ha'olam v'lo kedei sheyirdu ba'akum v'lo kedei sheyenasu oisam ha'amim. Although all of that will happen. V'lo kedei lecha v'lishtais u'lismayach, although that will happen too. Ela kedei sheyu pnuyim b'toiru b'chachmasa v'lo yeh lehem noigis u'mevatel. What we've been mistaking for is the ability to have Torah b'shleimus. That's our mistaking. That's what we want. It doesn't just mean to be able to be Mekayim Avodah without. It means kedei that all the noigis and mevatlim, all that prevents Torah b'shleimusa should be removed. And that's why the Rambam says that the chazorah of the mishpatim shoyim mikoydem, the chazorah of karbonos, the chazorah of shmitim v'yoivlos is all. The Brisker Rov, ordinarily, from the way the Talmidim describe him, was not expressive emotionally. But the Talmidim remember that the one time that the Brisker Rov, in their words, went a race from Kalim, was during the piyut of the avodah of the Kohen Gadol in Tfilas Musa. And the Brisker Rov says, Brisker Rov was there, and the Talmidim would add that what the Brisker Rov meant is that his whole life was dedicated to the limud of Seder Kodesh Be'iyun. When it came a time, the Brisker Rov put all his Torah, every shtickle Torah on what Hazor ben Abadim is, every shtickle Torah on Avodas Seirim, every shtickle Torah on all that Torah HaKadoshim, all went into that hishtoikikus to once again see the Kohen Gadol ba'avodah. So the Brisker Rov gave on right upon him, the Talmidim describe, and he was a race from Kalim. This is our hishtoikikus. Lo nisavu chachamim, except to be able to be Mekayim Torah b'shleimusa. We want that Dinei Tum and Torah should be Lamaisa. We want that there should be Avodas HaKarbonos. We want that Dinei Zroim should be Noeg Lamaisa. All of this is part of what we're mistaking for. Ultimately, the Chazorah of Beina Mikdash and Mekabetz in Chesol Chazorah Beis David is to be Maimed Ol Mishpatei Shel Torah. After Kibbutz in Chesol, so Shiur sheftenu k'varitzoinu v'hasimenu yogain v'anacha. The yogain v'anacha is the mevatlim and the tirdas of not being able to have a Sanhedrin at Mikdash to be Maimed Mishpat in Klal Yisrael. And how much we know and how much we suffer from the chisaron of being able to be maimed the das al til. This is what Zot the Rambam is what we're mistaken for. And this perhaps, and the Seder Dvarim is brought in a beautiful shmuz by Naftali Akain Kopshitz, Shiur and Beis Medrash Elin in Bnei Brak, the Rav in Ramema. There's a Sefer Gam Yecholti, in which he has a beautiful drosha for Yimei Ben HaMetzarim, where he uses essentially this yisoy to answer a very basic kasha. He says that the Rambam says that Chachamim when nisave Kedei that they should be able to be poni b'Torah b'chachmasav l'yigam noiges u'mavata. He says, on the other hand, we understand that all our schar is from the lefum tzara agra. All our schar comes from Yisayim. The Gemara says, Yagiu yomim sheyomer b'hem eli b'hem teifetz. Adarabba, there won't be nisayin and there won't be schar in Rishayim. They say, why are we being nisava to that? So he says a dover nifla. He says there's a difference. He says, if we're nisava for those who Moshe Mashiach, because then we'll have a new start. There's a heres shver. When it become green, we'll start avodah then. In a chanami, then we'll be mevakesh avodah without nisyanis. But if the hishtoikuk is that everything that I want right now can't be, but we're yearning for the opportunity to be able to be mekayim what already now we want, just we can't, then Yemoseh Mashiach then just becomes the gemar of all the lefum tzara of now. The nisavu achachomim is we're desperate to have mishpatei shel Torah. We're desperate to learn without tirdas. We're desperate to learn without nisyanis. If Yemoseh Mashiach is the oisfer, is the gemar, is the culmination of all the she'ifas that we have now, then everything that we're going to be mekayim there is part of the lefum tzara agrov now. Masha'inkin, if it's just kedei to be able to be zeichet avoida without tirda, Taka doesn't have lefum tzara goes venzach what our tzipiyah is. And this b'siyata d'shmaya is our avoida on these yom of tzipiyah Yeshua, where we misava so many of the kinnas are geboit on understanding the tiferes of Klal Yisrael b'zman hamikdash. It's not just the chazoin of the future; it's the deep tsar of what we can't have now. So when we zeichet to a Be'ezer Hashem, it becomes a hemshech of all the yetzdige hishtoikikos, and memela that's all part of the shleimus of our avodah of now, for which Be'ezer Hashem will be zeichet b'bias ge'el tzedek and here b'mina.